There we go.
Now it is.
That works better. Anyway, so in the park, you have your preferences. You can do all that. If you want to, you can set grid size is 5. That's just a little bit easier in my opinion. Snap angle, background colors, whatever color that is. We're not going to touch on much of this. This here is a little bit important. When we see the different G-forces that were had, how we had the curves, how we had the loops and stuff, they had the colors on them. You can set that limit per your park. So if you are building a children's park, you don't want your positive G's to be that high. However, we can color it however we want. I just like to leave the default easy enough. So we're going to create a new park. You can create your park any way you want. Name it anything you want. You're going to create a park. It'll load up. Perfect. So the way that I personally just have it set up with the quad view is I have my front up top here, the top down view, the view of the track so I can travel along and see how alternating my curves are going to be, how wiggly it is, how we can adapt it, as well as a perspective, which if I right click on it and use WASD, I can fly around the area. And if you hold down shift, you'll speed up and go a little bit faster. We talked about the park settings. We can talk about the environment. You can override it. You can create snow within your park. You can do weather. You can do all sorts of environmental changes. So to start your coaster, you're going to hit new coaster, type in the name of whatever you want. That is going to open the coaster as opposed to opening the park. When you have your different coasters within your park, you can switch between them using this little drop down here. If I were to create another one, it'd be right here, and I can alter the points between the different coasters here. You can import a coaster if you have it in a different file, delete it. Coaster properties is going to be pretty important for this beginning part. You can pick any type of coaster that you want. With the different coasters, they obviously are going to have a different amount of G-forces they can handle. They can have a different style of support system. They all require different things. So before you decide what you exactly want, you probably want to do a little research on what each one is. Just for this demonstration, we can start with, let's do a hybrid coaster. We'll do lightly worn. The mode, we don't need anything in there. The trains will come back to this, but you can color your individual trains depending on what your coaster is. You can have them alternating. You can have them be all the same color, anything like that. We can deal with this afterwards. That's more of a decorative thing. The scripts, we won't really dive into here. That's a lot of coding to add additional elements and items that NoLimits doesn't have already in it. So, cool. So to begin, we're going to use the start vertex here. This is where the camera is going to be, I guess, stationed for the track view, as well as basically where you want your beginning of the coaster to be. So you put down your point. While it turns into this, the blue vertex, you're going to have it facing the direction that you want. The arrow is the direction that your track is going to travel. And you basically click on the point, you can drag it to match however you need. If you are on any of the settings and you don't want to be on it anymore, shortcut key is going to be the space bar. That just brings you to your normal mouse where you can select points again, anything like that. Let's see. So if you were to double click on any of the points, you're going to bring up your vertex panel, and we can add a roll just for an example here. Right here in the center. That'll bring up your roll point panel as well. We can delete that. There we go. Cool. With your different vertexes, this is basically going to be the path that your coaster travels along. It's a little different than a spline, but the main beam in the center here is going to be the direct path that it travels. So when you add them, you can add different points along the center line there. You can drag these, you can pull these. If you see the top view, it's going to pull it in the Y direction, and the top down, or the front view is going to pull in the Y direction. Top down is going to pull in the X and the Z. So to begin with, I personally like to start with the station. It gives me a beginning, it gives me an end. I know where I need to end up eventually. So to do that, we're going to type separator, put in 2 points. If you see, it highlights this middle section as white as opposed to the blue, where I can click on those and select those sections. When I get to that section that's white, I can go up to section type. I can add station. And if you see on the right side here, it gives me a nice outline of what my coaster actually decides that it's going to be. So I can pull these. So I have a good section of how many trains or how many cars are going to be in the train. And these can all be changed within the coaster properties themselves. If you want a shorter train, if you want a longer train, all of that material. Cool. Does everyone have any questions about this? You were able to set up a station. Cool. So as we had our arrow pointed, let's begin with a nice curve, and that's going to bring us to our first lift hill. We can continue adding vertexes until maybe about here. And then I can go into the vertex panel and set the height of however I want. Oh, no. There we go. I want on the Y about 150. So if you see on this vertex panel, it only did that 1 point that I selected. Each individual point has their own settings, their own coordinates within 3D space. Each vertex will follow the path that you have drawn. So if you see this little blue line, that's basically connecting the vertexes, while the coaster itself follows the path, follows the, I don't want to say hypotenuse, but the curve that is most natural. So if you see, let's see, we have your individual points here. We can raise those up, and we can make them slowly progress to the curve that we have. With most lift hills, they have a chain to actually pull the coaster up. We're going to go back to the type separator, though at the type separator, base of the hill. Now we have 2 separate sections here, 2 different types. We select one, create that as a lift. And now this weird section in the middle, this is just a normal coaster that's applied by gravity. We change that into a transport so you can get from the station to the lift hill itself. And if you can see the different colors there, I currently have these set up in the blocks. So every time it's a different color, that gives me a different block break for this point of view. Now, as Eric is mentioning in the chat, you can make your coasters straighter. The vertexes are going to show up directly wherever you click on them. So they won't be perfectly still, they won't be perfectly straight. If you select a section, you can make straight, which will be in all three space, or you can do it just from the view that you have selected it from. So for here, I want the top down to be straight, but I do want a slight curve on my lift hill. In this transport section, if I were to go to my track here, I can travel along it using W and S. If you hit A or D, that's going to bring you back to your starting vertex that you first placed. So as I travel along, you notice it has a slight curve to it. Most of the time when you do a curve, you want to bank into the curve just by a little bit so you can reduce the amount of G's being applied to it. So if I go back to this view, I want to add a little bit of a roll here. I add my roll point, and if I double click on it, I can slowly progress how much of a roll it's going to be. So as you notice, that rolled the entire thing. We don't want that. We want our station to be perfectly flat. So if we put another roll point here, this is basically saying, I want this point to be at 0. However, the next point, I want it to be at 30. So it's going to transition that all the way through. And then it rolls. Now our entire lift hill is altered, so you have to add roll points to counteract it. There we go. Is everyone up to this point? Yes, no, maybe so. Cool. Can add a roll into our station itself just to prevent it from being uneven. Goes over, goes all the way up, and now comes the fun part. We get to make our lift down. So I currently have this set to the front. I want to change it to the left. That alters the view so I can see everything that's going on. I can see the entire coaster section. I'm gonna add a vertex, and we're just going to slowly curve it down. We can alter the curve and make it much cleaner. But before that, we want to add a type separator at the top, just over the crest of the hill, so that the chain on the lift prevents it from pulling it back downward. Can I add more vertices to the track, or do I have to delete the track and add more? Nope. If you go to this insert vertex node, I guess, I don't know what to call that, you can actually go in and link between the two vertices. So if you see the little white lines on it, that's telling you which two it's connecting between. It'll add them in the middle. That's helpful when you're doing curves, when you're doing very specific styles of elements, so that you can add the vertices specifically where you want them to be. So back on that top side, go all the way up. And so here is an interesting, I guess, phenomena with no limits. Just because, as you can see here, I meant to have the coaster go directly down. However, the left view only shows me the left side. It doesn't show me the placement of the nodes in all of space. So as I place them, it curves it down to the side, which is, you know, okay if you want it to, but I would like to have my lift hill directly in the center. So I'm going to left click, drag, and that'll select all of those points, and I can pull them over. And then if I do the same thing here, I can make them straight. And now you can see from the coaster view, or the track view, goes all the way in, nice and straight. Now, let's pull these down, create a little bit more force. And let's change this to speed comb. As you can see on the colors here, this first section is the transport track. It has very minimal speed based on those little green lines. As you go up more, goes up even more, and your comb gets much larger. If your comb were to go too far, you can see how tall the comb is going to be. The same thing applies with the G-force comb. Now the G-force one is a little bit different. The direction of the comb coming off of the track is going to show you which way the force is pulling you. So as you're going up, your restraint is pulling you down. Your body wants to go down. So the comb is going to be on the bottom part. But as you go over the hill, you're being pulled down, you're being pulled down. It is going to, it's going to change color and become this yellower section. Anyone have any questions so far? I'm not going too fast. Do you want me to speed up? All right. So as we can see here, we have the end of our coaster right now. I would like to add a little turn in here to bring the coaster back around. Started off with our station here. We have our transfer track, our lift, brings you all the way to the top of the lift. If we slide that up there, there we go. And we're going to go around the curve. Now, as you can see on the comb here, these ones were vertical. That's applying a vertical force to you. As we're going around the curve, these ones are going to be coming off the side. These are the lateral forces, and you can see by the red color that this is much too sharp of a turn. You're going to be pulling off to the side, potentially, you know, flying out of the seat from your lateral forces. So to alter this, we're just going to pull these points out until it's a nice yellow color. If you want a more extreme coaster, obviously you're allowed to keep those. However, just keep in mind if you have younger children or older adults on it, they may not be able to handle those more extreme forces. So a little trick that I like to use is with the type separator. If you add it between the different locations, it's easier to select the points within them. So if I have a curve here, if I have a curve here as well as with my lift or my drop here, I can add that type separator so I can just keep track of what my different elements within the coaster are. Cool. So now go back to the station. We can route our coaster a little bit. Goes down. We have a pretty good speed comb. We go back up, and I think I want to add a let's add a launch here. So I'm going to add my points. I'm going to add a type separator. Now, NoLimits is very finicky. There's a lot of stuff that it can do. There's a lot of stuff that it cannot do. I don't know if there's a way to add an actual launch. However, a trick that I found is if you add a section type here, you add a transport section here, like we used over here. However, if you double click on it, it'll bring up this menu here. Theoretically, this is being used to travel your train. It's bringing it from one location to another. It has a speed on it, relatively slow, just so it can, it's not the thrilling part of the ride. We want to bump that up to 55 miles an hour. This is adding a nice launch to our coaster while not stopping it entirely. So ride this all the way through. We're going to make these straight here. There we go. With the brake or block, can't remember, you can make a launch, you can stop and then go. You make a stopping brake and transport after it should create the effect. Sure. I didn't know that. Yeah. So as Eric is saying, you can have it stop at your location. So within your block brake section, it'll allow you to freeze that coaster there, give it a 5-second delay, and then launch it off again by using, I guess, the brakes and then a transport section after that. Anyway, so we have our launch here. Now we want to add an element to it. Elements are basically different special tracks that you can have. You can have a loop, a corkscrew, curves, which are built into the system, but you can do it on your own. Which one would you like to do, guys? You want to do a loop? Do you want to do corkscrew, a cobra roll?
Cobra roll.
Okay. So with that, the elements are a little finicky. So the way that they work is, I'm just going to do this as an example, and then we'll do it the actual way. So it has a bunch of steps that you're going to put in your dimensions within the element itself. So as you go through, it'll tell you the recommended element dimension for it. So the radius of the half height of the cobra, which will be this point up to here, we currently have it set at that. The half loop stretch, which will be there. it's recommending between those values will give you typical results. So for 5, V-shaping, and then how much is stretching. Let's do a 0.3. Then when you're here, you hit OK. It's going to put your thing in the coaster itself. So as you notice, this is a little, obviously it's backwards. We want it to be up over here, as well as a little tight. Until you're more experienced with no limits, I usually stick to the recommended designs. Altering them obviously will give you weird effects happening on them. So I can just Control Z, and we'll bring it back over here to add our point. If we hello, why are you not letting me select? There we go. I don't know. That was weird. So if we select that endpoint that we want it to be on, that's where it's going to put that first entry location, that entry node onto the track. So we add our element. I'm just going to click through. That's the recommended stuff. You can scale it depending on your values that you want. You can mirror it so it'll flip the other way. Full orientation. And that's what we just put in there. Now, if you notice, those colors are way extended. They're a much higher force than we probably want. However, because it's in a shorter experience, a shorter element, it's probably okay for 0.5 seconds or however long it takes to get through that roll. Let's add a type separator at the end here. There we go. So currently, since this is 55, we can bring that down to 45, and you can see how the forces on that are going to pull it. And if you notice up here, these are very low, so potentially it could not make it through the entire loop. If we bring up the speed comb, these forces are, where it's shorter up here, it's going to give you a little bit of a hang time effect. So if you're looking for that element, you can have that. Cool. Is anyone lost? Anyone have any questions? Did it do something weird? No? Cool. Moving on. So with our element here, we can add some points to help it curve. And I am going to have it curve up over the track so we can head back towards the station. A lot of no limits I have found is trial and error. It's putting something down, the program tells you no, so you adjust it and pull it in a different direction. It's hard to get your ideas out there in the first attempt. So we can continue to progress. Whoop. And I'm just randomly putting these down as we can adjust it later. I can select the different points. And pull them how I need to. There we go. So now here, as we can see at the end here, we want to bring it back towards the end of the coaster. We are going to make a nice loop. It doesn't matter about the height yet, as we can adjust that later on. I'm going to delete this. This style separator here. And now when I want these 2 points to connect, I control click on each of them, hit connect, and it's going to create a direct path between the two. Now, obviously, we don't want this entire section to be station. That's the word I'm looking for. So we can put a style separator here, and it's going to show us the entire progression. So now, most coasters don't have you flying into the station. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 out there that do, but we're going to bring these points down to be a little flatter. We have our current station set at about 6.5 feet. So I want out here to be at about 6.5 feet as well. Just go through and click all of these. Now, we have a relatively completed coaster. Obviously, it doesn't look pretty. Obviously, it potentially doesn't run all the way through. There might be a speed issue. There might be a blocking issue, anything like that. However, if we were to go all the way through here, this shows us what your guests are going to see as they're riding. So right here, let's go backwards to it because it's towards the end. Up at the peak of this hill here, you can see that the speed cone disappears into the track. That means the coaster wouldn't be able to make that entire lift. So you can either bring the pieces down, you can add another this thing, what's that thing called? Boost, whatever. And that can help you with your speed. I want to make this a little bit of a more curved effect. So I'm going to bring everything down and add a slant to it, add a roll to it, as opposed to adding speed because it's towards the end of our coaster. We want to be reducing how much speed we have coming into the track itself, having into the station itself. Cool. So just as a little test, when I go over to coaster, I'm going to freeze my coaster. That's going to apply all of the nodes. It's going to apply all of the textures to the coaster itself. It's going to show me, if I were to put in supports, it'll show me all the supports. If I put in any special elements, lighting, sound, it's going to show me those as well. And it's going to take its time. Perfect. So as you can see, it has the actual track of the coaster style that we picked. It has the station built in, stairs, railings, all of that applied to it. It has the traveling track as well as the lift hill. You can see the actual chain within the thing. There's all of that. So if we wanted to ride our coaster, we would need to save it. We're going to leave the editor and hit play. This is going to put us in the seat of the coaster. I can look around with the mouse. See, I'm in this first track here. We're just going to let it run through and see where the first issue is. At this point, we are debugging it. We're finding out where all of our problems are. Obviously, there are going to be problems within the coaster. Right here at the end of that Cobra roll, it has a weird angle on it. The lift hill over on that side there has bumps in it. It's got waves in it. All right, we're coming up to the launch section that we added. Speeds up. We go, there's a little bit of hang time. That's probably too much. So we might want to add a little bit of speed to that so that you can go over those a little bit easier. Curve all the way around. All the way through. Perfect. And our coaster is going to come into it. This last section here, we probably want to add a brake just so it's not running into the station too fast. So to exit this view, we hit escape. We go back to the editor. In order to change anything, we do have to unfreeze the coaster. That'll allow you to edit the points. That'll allow you to edit the nodes. So while it's on my mind, I'm going to add the style separator here. I'm going to add a brake section. That changed its colors. You can double click on that. You can alter what type of brake you have. You can add transport devices within the brake section, as I believe Eric was mentioning with the launch. You can, if you wanted to trigger at the beginning of the car, if you wanted to trigger at the end of the car, at the end of the train, at the beginning of the train, all of that. I'm just going to leave it as the given. Cool. Are you guys doing okay? Do you have any questions? You sort of have a coaster going. Cool. So as you can see here, there are bumps within my coaster. I don't want a wavy section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, it's probably better to do a top-down view here. I'm going to click on all of the nodes that seem to be giving me problems. If I hold Control and do this, I can go into Elements. I can depump the vertices. That's going to try and smooth it out, create a nice clean line. As we watched, it was much more, it's much smoother now. It's much more connected. So we can do that all the way around here. Theoretically, you can depump all of the vertices on the entire coaster. I like to do it section by section just because I can have more control over it. So if I were to select all of these here and depump those, it makes it a smoother, less forceful encounter. So right here, let's add a roll into it. Let's say, maybe a 60-degree roll. So as we're going, rolls all the way through, and about at this point here, we want it to come out of the roll. So here, we're going to go against the curve that we initially put here. This row here was a -60. So at this point here, we probably want it to be about maybe 15 or so to counteract those forces, pull you back into that the straighter downward slope. We just add roll points all the way down the track, similar to the vertices. And we may need to extend this break a little bit more. Decelerate at 1.2. Looks like we need some roll points in here. So that as we go up, we curve into it, around, and back down. Excellent. So I just switched my view over down here to the blocks. As we were talking about the blocks before, that's the location that your trains can stop if there is an e-stop or an emergency needed. As you can see here, the lift has one color, while the track itself has another. It's going to be your two different block sections. So it looks like I have one red, one blue, one green, which comes all the way around, coming down to the section here, and back into the station. I have three blocks. So theoretically, I can coaster properties. I can add a train to it. There we go. There's our secondary train. As we were saying in the slides, you typically want your blocks -1. I have 3 blocks. -1 gives me 2 trains. If you were to reduce the number of reduce the number of cars within your train, that'll alter the number of blocks that you have. So for this launch section, theoretically, that is a block as well. However, I don't know if NoLimits recognizes it as one, just because we used a transport section as opposed to like a break section. So it disregards it. Anyway, cool. So we have about our coaster. Let's add some supports in. We go up to the support tab. I like to use the rail connector as well as the footer, as opposed to putting in a prefab support. NoLimits has a lot of stuff pre-built for you. It'll pick based on your coaster, it'll have different elements to it. So this one has a dive coaster. This one is for a 4D coaster, which has additional elements on it, a Gigabox coaster. You can add these to your coaster just by clicking it, adding it, boom, it's done. However, it might not be the correct style for the coaster that you picked. In order to create your own, you're going to add a rail connector. You click it onto the section of the track that you want your beam to connect to. You're going to add a footer underneath it, and then you take the beam and drag between the 2 points. So as we can see, we probably want to put this lower down. And if we were to freeze it, maybe. It'll add that support beam right there in the center. With these supports, you can also add a secondary beam to it. You need a beam node on your beam itself. See the little purple dot there? Then you can connect the two there, and it will have the beam connected. If you look at most coasters, they don't have, a lot of them don't have just a single beam supporting it. It's two triangles coming up together. It's acting on the forces. If you take stuff like statics, you'll see, and you do the beam node analysis, that's a lot of what they're talking about here, how if you have just the vertical beam, that's going to be in your Y forces. That'll take all of your Y forces, but if you add a side to it, it's going to do that Y cosine of that force adding to it on the side. So if we wanted to, we could go all the way through, add those support pieces. Just for demonstration, I'm going to add a couple. Let's do these ones are basic. Add a couple here. It's going to put it down to the ground. For something like this, where it has a spin in it, a corkscrew, any inversion that's going to have your curve, you want to be cautious on what side your coaster is traveling. So as we're coming up here, we're on the right side where my mouse is. It curves over and curves back. So in this case, we're going to want our support piece to be coming off of the left side. We can add a footer down on the bottom here. We can add our beam. And theoretically, that should be off to the side here. Obviously, that's not what we wanted. So we just unfreeze. I'm going to delete that node point, and we are going to add a free node off in the air somewhere around here. Our footer is about here. Let's add a free node. It's a little hard to see, but we can add it maybe about here. And have our rail connector. Going to pull this free node. So it's about in line with our beam. We'll pull this out to connect to this node. And then from the node down to the beam. Obviously, if you were to look at an actual coaster, it wouldn't just stick out to the side here. That wouldn't be doing anything for the forces. However, just for demonstration, it shows how off to the side the support piece can be as opposed to directly in the center of the path. Cool. So we covered elements, we covered tracks. You have roles, vertexes, style separator. If you wanted to put this in, you can have this section be a different style. This is where you can add catwalks to it. So typically on your lift hill, if you were to select this, I want a catwalk off to the side, and let's throw a round concrete tunnel on it. Obviously, you can't see it right now. However, if you were to freeze this section or the entire coaster, maybe, there we go. That pops up there. The catwalks were overridden by the tunnel. However, they should be applied somehow. Anyway. Trigger points. These are these little orange dots. You can add those similar to the vertex point, or the vertex points as well as the support nodes. These are going to, if you have a special effect on your train, if it spins, if it rotates, if it swings, this is how you do that. Once you put these points on there, you set each point as a specific thing. You can unlock the spinning, lock the spinning, depending on your coaster. So we covered that, we covered elements, we covered support. As I said before, in the slides, you can do a wooden coaster. When you generate your wooden coaster, it has all of the individual beam pieces on it. That the wood, you can't buy wood in 40-foot sections. You have to buy it in smaller pieces. So this is going to help you generate what that underlying support system will look like. You can add specifics to it. You can have an entire section, have handrails, catwalks, anything like that. My computer is being weird. This is a problem. Are you guys seeing this? No? Anyway. So is there anything that I was missing? Terrain. With your terrain, you can have different textures in it. You can have different features. Currently, I have a grass layer set up here. If I were to hit this new layer here, I can go in, I can select different types of grass, I can add different pavements, anything like that. You can auto paint, which allows you to automatically apply a coverage to an area, the opacity to an area. Bump mapping, I'm not entirely sure what this is. However, it's I believe it's like the texture within the section. So if it's a 1 foot by 1 foot section, it's going to help repeat that material within that section. So if I were to change this to rock, lava rock terrain, I can change that. And I can move this up. That's going to apply the entire texture to the area. You can also, before you start your coaster, you can also generate a new terrain. It'll apply water, it'll apply mountains, maximum, minimum heights. Can you guys still see what I'm doing?
I think it just froze.
Okay, because I have a 2-monitor setup and my laptop is not cooperating. Give me 1 second. Can you guys still see me?
Yes.
Okay. This is a little bit of a problem. Anyway.
What happened?
Like I have my second monitor, I can see everything on that, but the screen attached to my laptop is no longer on. Anyway, I think that's the computer, not me. So we're just going to continue with this. Cool. So we should be back to the coaster. Anyway, you guys can see my coaster. We have your different terrain elements. You can add you can change the entire terrain for the height. You can smooth it. You can modify the height. So this influence here, the bigger the influence, the bigger the area that you're going to be changing. So if I wanted to create a mountain here, I'd pull this all the way up. You can add paint to it. So depending on the different layers that you want, you can change your influence back to these settings here, depending on those layers. can add this, and I can paint that section, that rock color. The next section is a fun one, is the scenery. This has a bunch of elements, different objects that you can import in order to show off your park, give it effects. So if I were to go into park here, if I were to go to fence set, I can come down to my frozen track to see where the entrance is. Scenery, I can choose that, add the object, and I can place pieces of fence all the way down the entrance here. If I were to double click on this, I can adjust it in 3D space so that each element is lined up, create a queue line, create whatever you want in it. NoLimits is nice with this. They do have a large setup here. It's got tons of different pieces of foliage. It's got tons of grass. You can decorate it, make it look pretty. As you see here, these NLS, SCO, and the matte editors, that is how you import your own objects. To my knowledge, NoLimits uses a .3ds as well as a .dae file. So either of those two files will allow you to import an object and place it within the world. However, any textures that you have, so coloring, wood texture, all of that, need to accompany that file into the park file on your computer. So let me see if I have an example. I have checkbox. This is a fun one. I made this little box in SolidWorks. It's got coloring on it, and it has a JPEG image of Shrek on it. I can import it into here. I can change the scale, and it can be a major show element within my coaster. So with these two things, you have the NCO, which is the actual object file, and the matte editor, which is going to be the different textures and shading elements within that object. Okay. So we have a relatively working coaster. I can't see the chat because of the whole screen thing. So if someone could read that to me, that'd be helpful.
Is there a way to import custom ride vehicles, like if you made one in SolidWorks, or like modify the preloaded ones?
Yes and no. The way that I have done that is basically you create a secondary coaster that overlaps with the one that you have and set your ride vehicle to invisible, transparent, and add the object file on top of it and bind it to the coaster itself, or bind it to the train itself. You can't edit an existing coaster car. The most you could do is the style here, unless you go into the actual program files and edit those. I don't know how to do that. I've never attempted that one that way specifically, but I've seen it done before.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Here's the thing that we forgot. If I want to I can split at this section. An important element that we need is a transfer table. These are how you can produce storage onto your coaster. So as you can see here, we can rotate this to match up. We're going to try and drag this down so that it lines up with the track the best that we can. We can select this point and this point, connect those two, and select this point and that point and connect those two. Now with the transfer table, you double click on the center and it's going, you can set the default track so that it matches up with the coaster itself. And when you are in the play view, if you bring up the control panel, you can alter which track this is on. If I were to add some points here, theoretically my coaster could come to a stop here. I can bring it over and it'll fall back into the storage section. You can change this section on here to storage. And when you freeze it, it is going to actually add a housing unit around that storage section. If you were to add your own element, you just say don't add the storage building and it should be okay with that. Here, whoops, what is happening here? Oh, it dragged it all the way through. Station. This one here is no longer going to be a station. There we go. So these two sections here, if I were to double click on this, I can add a building to it. It'll add a little structure around it. Okay. Section type. I think that just about does it. Is there anything that I didn't cover that you guys want to know? Then I think we're done here. If you guys have any other questions, please let me know. Stop screen sharing there. Awesome. And then, Jason, do you want it to go back to the main room or?
No, you all can leave from here. Thank you, Billy, again. That was really cool. Yeah. And I just want to say that the next skill session is Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it is Intro to CAD. So that should be fun. Thank you all.
Have a great evening, guys.
Thank you.